Hello, this is Riccardo from the Intersight TME team. In this video we will demonstrate how to execute tasks in parallel with Intersight Orchestration. We will run a sample scenario for which we deploy multiple virtual machines at once, based on user inputs. First of all, let's create a new workflow, and we're going to give the name create multiple VMs. We also enable debug logs, and we're also going to add a new workflow input. So this workflow input will allow our users to specify one or multiple virtual machines names. So we're going to give it the display name virtual machines, and the reference name would be VMs. We mark that as a required input. The type is string, and we can check the collection multiple to make it actually an array. So we can specify a minimum size, let's say 1, and a maximum size, so the maximum number of VMs the user can actually create, which is going to be 5 in this example. So the system renders the preview of what our users are actually going to see. And as you can see, we can specify one or multiple virtual machines. Let's go ahead into the designer canvas. Under operations, we drag the parallel loop task. And if we click on that, we can see that the only mandatory input is the iteration count, which basically represents the number of times you want to execute in parallel the task within this parallel loop box. The iteration count needs to be a number. You can explicitly specify how many times you want to execute the task, or like in our case, we want to be dynamic, so it will execute X times, where X is the number of VMs requested. To do so, we use the function len against the workflow input we created a moment ago in order to render the actual number of times we want to execute based on the number of requested virtual machines. Now we need to execute something in our parallel loop box, so we look for a task that creates new virtual machines. And this task is the new virtual machine from template or clone from virtual machine. We drag it within the parallel loop box. When we click on that, we can access its inputs, outputs, and properties. So we go ahead and map our inputs as usual. Now, for the virtual machine name input, we want to assign to each iteration the right name based on user inputs. To do so, we go ahead and use an advanced mapping. The syntax global workflow input VMs represent the workflow input we created a moment ago. Recall that this workflow input is an array of elements with variable length, so we enhance our syntax by selecting the element based on the iteration index. For instance, if our user defines the name of 4 virtual machines, each VM creation task will have an iteration ID starting from 0, so task 0, 1, 2, and 3. The index keyword will pick the VM name based on the iteration index represented by the parameter .iteration. So the first task with iteration ID 0 will pick the first element of the array, the one with iteration ID 1 the second, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and map. Now we save the workflow for validation, and we go ahead and execute that. So we're going to specify a couple of VMs. We call them demo VM1 and demo VM2. We go ahead and execute that. And we can see that the workflow is running and creating those 2 VMs. The VMs are up and running. And the workflow is now succeeded. We can inspect the inputs to check what name we actually assign to each iteration. And you can see this one, for instance, has given the name demo VM2, and the other one, the demo VM1 name. Let's roll it back. The rollback capability of Intersight Orchestration is tracking the number of resources we created within the loop. So if we go ahead and roll it back, it's going to delete those 2 VMs. As the rollback request executes, you can see those VMs going away.